Okay, so I'm just going to reshare the clips for those who just joined in case you don't see them. It's generally best practice to look at the clips on your own, so by accessing that YouTube link in the chat. If you're having trouble finding the chat, it's usually on that bar with the kind of green like new share slash your microphone icon and all that kind of stuff. And then if you open up the chat, the dialogue looking window, it will have a link to our YouTube channel, and I've put up the 5 clips that we'll use for some discussion. So just 3 big picture items to look at today. Again, not trying to dive into the weeds, but trying to give us all good takeaways to build momentum into January, so that you can, go off, do the things that you need to do in order to be ready for the next half of the season. Because again, things like playoffs, it might seem like it's a while away, but it's basically only 8 rounds of season, and then we get into the business end. So here we go. So we'll look at 3 big areas: human, technical, and tactical. What that means effectively from a human point of view is how we can affect the game and add value without even making decisions. So all the things that we do in our day-to-day lives that can add value to us as in our role as match officials. We'll look a bit at technical, hopefully not too much. It will be mainly a check-in for where we feel we're at personally and as a group, as a community across BC. In terms of our key focus areas, we will have a little bit of a dive into the head contact process, just making sure that everyone knows where to find the right information, because I know we've gone from a very inconsistent framework to the right before the 2019 World Cup high tackle framework, and now we're operating under the head contact process, and we hear things on TV, but again, there's ways to peel it back and make it more useful for the community game, which is what we mainly do week to week. And finally, look at the tactical. We've got 1 clip, which is kind of an interesting one. It's not so much about the outcome and about the decision we make, but what are we doing in order to see these things happen or feel them before they happen? So we'll be looking at kind of a holistic approach to understanding the game. So hopefully that will be enjoyable for everyone. So we'll kick things off, and what I'll do is I will throw it open to everyone, and then if we feel like we're not really comfortable in this kind of large group setting as 27 people, we can get into breakout rooms. So feel free to answer this question in the chat, either with 1, 2, 3 words, a sentence maximum, or just unmute yourself and fire away. And yeah, we'll see what we can do. If you feel like you rather a small group setting, we can chuck ourselves into breakout groups afterwards. But effectively, just to get us going, a management skill that we've looked at before when we've talked about managing a game's temperature is really what we can do behaviorally to affect a game's temperature. So the question I'll ask is a very direct one, without saying anything more. What can we do as match officials to directly influence a game's temperature? So that's how the players are behaving as individuals or as a team, in a positive or a negative way. So that could be anything. I won't put any qualifiers in there. So again, we'll give it a moment. We'll take a pause, and then if you have a couple of ideas, fire them in the chat, or by all means, unmute yourself, and we'll go from there.
Well, as a teacher, I know that's my attitude or my emotions tend to rub off on my surroundings. So if I'm calm, generally the players should be calmer. If I'm emotional, the players may also be emotional.
Really cool. Anyone else? Again, we'll fire away. We'll kind of use a waterfall tactic, and then maybe we can see if we can find some parallels and draw some conclusions from what the group has to offer. Sweet, we'll give it another half minute here. All right, so just given what has been said, so obviously we can draw some parallels here, but the challenge I have to the group is which of these things can be done before a game, and which of these things are things that we need to do throughout a game. So it's just something to think about. So have a look through what's been said in the chat, maybe rethink the question, but you need to divide these things into two ways. What is done before we start the game? So before we've even, crossed that white line, and what do we have to do? And they can be the same thing, but what do we have to do all the time? As people managing games of rugby. And Dave, just for your benefit, you just joined. There's a question up on the screen, but we've just filtered through some of the answers, and we've challenged people to rethink which of these skills apply before a game and which of them apply throughout a game, or both. And we'll round it up in about another 30 seconds. Sweet. Just before we carry on, there was a really good question put in from Dwayne, and directed at Bruce's comment, which is making sure you set your stall or set your expectations. It's a really interesting one. But Bruce, would you care to elaborate on what that could look like from a positive point of view before the game?
Yeah, just it's before the game as well as during the game. Just when you're having your pre-game chats, you're meeting the captains, meeting the players. It's all about whatever you're discussing with them, and obviously listening to some of their thoughts and feelings. You then are setting expectations to that they're going to test you on, and you need to stick with that, whatever those are, but also in doing so, certainly during the game, especially to use the captains, the leaders, to help with those expectations being set.
Yeah, and again, I love that notion of like, this is a before the game and a during the game piece. Shanda added something that probably qualifies that, in the sense that professionalism, and that's not necessarily being rigid or harsh, but again, expectations can be set verbally, they can be set non-verbally, but it is a thing that is ongoing before the game. And just, I'll direct you to this little graphic. This is the Batari box. I'm sure those of you in the education world or the corporate world have seen it before, but it's a good little reminder. You know, your attitude, whether that be what it images, I guess, for lack of a better term, you present verbally or non-verbally, affects your own behavior, which affects you know, the attitude of somebody else, which affects their behavior and and it's cyclical. So just something to be aware of. You know, it becomes a feedback loop, whether it's intended or not. So just something to be aware of. And again, it's not because there's a trend from league competitions, but sometimes there have been some comments, and you know, whether it's CMO reports or just peer-to-peer chat or chat around the clubhouse of like, man, I think I don't understand why people may have reacted that way. It's not always about the technical decision, whether it's right or wrong, but this can be a great thing that can not only add to our own enjoyment, but to the way that the players perceive what we're doing, which makes life easier if we can take a bit of the heat off of us. And a couple of you alluded to two skills, which we've talked about before, just again, siphoning through the comments. You know, we want to be able to use time and space, which obviously it's that graphic on the right, and avoid what's on the left, which is, you know, just thinking of communication as something we do. You know, and this is something that we're all aware of, especially in the education and the professional world, of, you know, we're so focused on the words we use. But again, if the message isn't received or it's received in a different way than we intended, apologies, well, you know, that becomes a wasted effort. So just something to be aware of as a human skill. You know, we sometimes get a little bit carried away with, you know, video clips and things like that, especially because, you know, we're very lucky to have these tools at our disposal. But again, not at risk of neglecting this human piece. You know, let's acknowledge that. So we'll dive right into, so now that we've, you know, covered the human component, the goal of the season is this evening session, is not to, for us to learn all these things within 45 minutes to an hour, but to give you something, one or two things that you want to reflect on, or maybe go ahead and work on in downtime between now and, you know, we have a bit of rugby happening in the next couple weeks, some important age grade playoffs, but again, the majority of this community will be back in action on, you know, the 28th of January. So before we get into our first clip, and again, I'll do it again just because I know the clips that I put into the chat, if you join a little bit late, you don't see them. So I will put them at the bottom of the chat. So it's easy to access. Right there they are. So you can watch these clips. We've got 5 of them independently on your own computer, just so it's not laggy. I will share them on the screen so we can refer to kind of, you know, points of contact, all that kind of stuff. But again, if you click on that link, you can watch the clips at your own pace. But effectively, just to review, and all this stuff will be sent out. This is the big zoomed out version of the head contact process. You know, 1, 2, 3, 4. And again, just I'll take a moment to look at it before we get into our first view of clip number 1, and then we might revisit it afterwards. So this isn't the entirety of World Rugby's head contact process, but it is the kind of executive summary. And even this piece, if you have a good understanding of not only the words that are on the screen, but, you know, kind of how they interact with each other and how they flow, it might make decision making a little bit more intuitive. It takes practice, but it's actually the closest we've gotten as a global community in officiating and the game of making understandable decisions that people can accept and ultimately look after the welfare of players. So I won't speak through them. I'll give you a second, and then we will dive into clip number 1. If you want to watch it right away, it is the first clip on that link I sent, and I will pop it up on the screen in about 30 seconds. All right, so I have taken away that little graphic just because, well, if it's not something that we can conceptualize in a minute of looking at, well, then it might be too complicated, or we might need to look at it again. So this is clip number one. Again, it will be laggy on my stream. I'm just going to pause it right before contact, at point of contact, and let it run through for the context. But again, if you want to see detail, you can play it at your own leisure. So I will play it through now. Okay. I'm gonna play it through one more time. Again, we're gonna work in real time because we do not have the benefit of slow motion replay in community rugby, and the best referees and TMOs, even in levels of the game that have that, often make the best decisions in real time as well. Because again, we can make anything look horrific in super slow motion if we want to. Okay, so what I'm going to ask you to do is I'm going to go. I'll go back to the graphic of the head contact process. What I'll ask you to do is go through this in your mind. So again, have you seen head contact? And obviously there's a no and a yes over here. Have you seen foul play? Meaning, was the player that initiated the head contact at fault? And then we'll stop right there. So all we're doing, throw it in the chat. Has head contact occurred? Yes or no? And was there foul play? Which means, was the player who did the head contact at fault? And we'll unpack that a little bit later. But just either a no, and obviously no, a yes, no, or a yes, yes, are our possible outcomes here. So take your time and fire those into the chat if you can. So again, no, no, yes, no, yes, yes. And Zanger, you just joined us. There was if you look in the chat, I'll put it in again. I've put a series of clips. The first one is a potential piece of head contact. All we're worrying about is, has head contact occurred, and was the player who initiated it at fault? So we're either saying in the chat, yes, 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 no, or obviously no, no.
All right, thanks.
No problem. Sorry, we'll just give a second just for my benefit so I can have a look through these inputs that you all have very quickly chucked in. Okay, excellent. Just before we carry on, Tim, if you're comfortable, I don't mind the no yes here, and I love it. It's you know, a bit of a against the there's a lot of yes yeses, and it's not necessarily a bad thing, because again, the head contact process is not the only definition of foul play. There are other forms of foul play in the game. But what makes you believe, what facts do you see that, and again, I'm not asking a leading question, what facts do you see that leads you to believe that, hey, yeah, I don't see head contact, but I see a player at fault, I see foul play? If you wouldn't mind unmuting and going through that.
Yeah, I guess I had to look at it a few times, of course, but I saw more a leading shoulder on a shoulder rather than a head. So I guess that's what I saw initially. I didn't see much wrapping, so that's why I thought it was more a shoulder on shoulder, leading with the shoulder.
Sweet.
So
And we're just so we're clear, you're talking about the actions of number 19, the kind of player I have my cursor around.
yes, that's right. Yeah, number 19. Yeah.
Sweet. No, I love that, because if we look at this action, you know, and again, I'm sorry for the graininess, folks, but again, this is the second level of community rugby here, so still good effort from the club for putting up their second team game. I'm sorry, I'm just adding someone that's just joined late. Oh, they're gone now. That's okay. So this is one of those ambiguous clips where, and again, we're talking about on-field decision making. So again, I don't. For those of you who are wondering if you know if there were sightings or anything like that, we're not trying to put the off-field decision making process under pressure, because that they have to operate under a different paradigm. But this particular action, if we watch it from here to there, the answer's in the facts. So what I love is some people back themselves and they're like, yeah, I've seen head contact. And Tim, Tim's like, I haven't seen head contact, but the beauty is most of us are not okay with this action. So obviously we see there's a bit of a rip in a tackle here. Blue and white ends up getting possession. So a bit of an intercept / rip in the tackle from blue number 2. So there's a turnover. Blue should win the ball here, as most of the white players, so the solid white players, are in front of the ball. So as the clean out comes, we see that number 17 ends up in a position at risk. And what I mean by at risk is, you know, if we see him as a tackler, we might penalize him. And obviously this clean out happens here, right there, bang. So it's a pretty big contact. And again, we're not here to debate the actual decision. What we're concerned about is how are we arriving at this? Because we will not see a carbon copy of this exactly in a game of rugby. Things are so dynamic. But again, as long as we're clear at what facts we're looking for, if we get a fact wrong, that's okay. What we have to get right is how we arrive at a decision. So one more look at it, bang. So I'll take this away on purpose and we'll go back to this. So Tim, you made a really good point, and you said I can't see whether it's, you know, head on head or head on shoulder, but we got to this step here, and you know that, hey, it's for you it's a leading shoulder, and that's an issue. So someone's made contact with an opponent not using their arms, which is foul play, even though it's not in this head contact process. So in that stage, our decision isn't as cut and dry as if there was head contact, but especially if you feel there's someone on the ground, they've made contact. Sorry, Tim, if you saw this, like someone's made contact with a shoulder on the ground, you're not sure if there's head contact, but you're like, that's pretty unnecessary. What's the decision you're going to arrive at?
I guess then sorry, the degree of danger, which is probably it's not low. It's certainly more than heading towards the high end, I guess.
Sweet. So if you had to pull the trigger, what are you going to do?
It's yellow card or red card decision, I guess.
Sweet. No, I can buy that. And again, the key here, whether you're going to go yellow, whether you go red, whether you're going to go penalty kick, if you're using this process, you're bound, especially if you have the fact of there has been head contact, you are bound to follow that process and use the facts to arrive at the decision. And this process is there to be a tool, not be a hindrance. So if those of you who are at head contact, great, then we go into this. And this is basically, is the player at fault? For me, there is no way that you can say the player isn't at fault, because player at fault, what does that look like? That is, the player had no time to do anything different. There was something suddenly that happened that caused the contact, or it was the person that received the contact that actually put themselves in a vulnerable position. In this case, yes, the tackler who ended up being the tackler, should have rolled away. But just because someone doesn't roll away doesn't mean that they're at fault for being smashed on the ground. So that if you are going to go on this one, being very careful with the choice of your words here. And we'll get into the guidelines here. No fault has to be something in this category, and not necessarily those words exactly, but it has to be that kind of picture. So it's either something really passive where you're like, you know, it's not really anything, let's play. There's no leader, there's an arm close to the body, and there's a bit of incidental shoulder contact, but there's an attempt to grasp. Again, involuntary collision. No time to adjust, meaning someone's jumped or been pushed into you, as we've seen with the Joe Marler incident, which ended up being a penalty against his team, as a player who smashed their face into his shoulder was pushed into him, or a sudden and significant drop in height by the ball carrier that was unavoidable. Because this sudden change in height exists in mitigation as well. But when we talk about no fault, the big word is this collision was unavoidable. And if we're comfortable with that, we'll move on. And again, literally, we don't want to be hung up on the outcome. The referee on the day had a good view of it, and if the facts the referee had were add up, which the referee's report pretty much led to that outcome, we're in a good place. Versus if we're looking at this and we're trying to guess, then we're in trouble. And again, the rugby public love to talk about this last piece, mitigation, especially when they're criticizing those of us who do a bit of TMOing. But mitigation is the last step of the process. And we won't talk more about this. We'll look at a second clip that might actually get to this stage. So here, we didn't even talk about degree of danger. Actually, Tim, you talked about it because of the path you followed, which is great. And you said, hey, it's not low. Great, you can go yellow there. Avoid the use of the word high, generally, unless you have a red card or there's clear mitigation, just to protect yourself. So again, this will be sent out to you, but just learning some of these key words will help guide, you know, your gathering of the facts and your delivering of the decision. It takes practice. So let's do it another clip. So it's clip number 2 in the link I just sent out. I'll pop it up on the screen. And it is at, it starts at 1:03, approximately. Sorry to put you under pressure, Cole. They're just 2 really, really good clips. But yeah, well refereed. Cool. So I'm going to show it one more time in real speed on this one. Again, look at it on your own platform if you want to see it more clearly. But please look at it in real time. And we'll go back to that graphic. So this time, let's go into the third step of the process here and resist the temptation of talking about or thinking about mitigation just for the moment until we see some feedback from the group. So what we want to see is a yes or a no, followed by a second. So that's in this, has head contact occurred? A yes or a no for was there foul play? In other words, was it avoidable? If yes, obviously we go down the pathway, and the degree of danger. And be mindful, it's a strange graphic, low and high. There's actually no medium danger. So if you ever hear a referee use medium danger, they've kind of made their own thing up. But Mike Adamson actually is a master of this. He's used it on a few occasions. Not high is a good way to sell this, but effectively, this can be, there are descriptive words we can go through after, but this is very much a feel piece and a judgment piece. But again, if you are solid on step 1 and 2, this actually is not as subjective as some people believe. And again, there are objective words in there, but do go through that process, and we'll talk about maybe why we got to those decisions in a few moments. So again, look at
Hey, Chris.
Was there foul play and degree of danger? Yeah, go on.
Yeah, just a question. Like, I'm just wondering how you can reconcile the fact that for a degree of danger, you can say it's more of a feel thing, but also it's not subjective.
No, good call. So most of the time you've got one look at it, and there are descriptive words that go, what is low danger and what is high danger? A lot of those descriptive words are subjective in nature. So let's go back to the trigger words. So some of these pieces are subjective. However, once you become familiar with your video and you compare them against the norm, so in a teacher assessment way, it becomes a norm-based reference. Whether or not you agree with that from an educational point of view is up to you, but there's words like indirect contact. That's objective. Was the contact to the head, or did it come on the shoulder and the head, or did some of the force come to the chest? However, low force, 100% subjective. You have to be comfortable with what that looks like in your mind, and there are best practice indicators. Low speed, same thing. What does that look like? What does that look like in Div 3 versus or under 16s versus what does that look like in international rugby? Passive, what does that look like? Now, World Rugby's added in other guidelines, law application guidelines, which are the PDFs they put on the websites, can be quite wordy, sometimes less, but things like soak tackles have been introduced versus dynamics or aggressive tackles. But then there's objective pieces like no leading head, shoulder, or forearm. Does that make sense if I show you these trigger words?
Yeah, definitely that helps. The red card is quite well defined. Play on is very well defined. But then yellow card or just penalty kick is not at all well defined.
And the reason they want it to have some subjectivity in it is because they do not want, there's no catch-alls. It's such a dynamic game that if they gave you, this is a yellow card, we will have more errors where the common sense fan, the person that's just watching the game, with their dog on the sidelines or on TV, will go, how did you arrive at that? So play on, it's pretty cut and dry. Red card, it's pretty cut and dry. Yellow card it's that low danger piece. And it's also designed to give you, as a match official, breathing room. If your temperature of your game is high, well, maybe, and you're on that PK yellow card spectrum, maybe you're towards PK. If your temperature of your game is low, maybe you're towards yellow card, I meant to say. If your temperature of your game is low, maybe you're towards penalty kick, especially if there hasn't been any issue in the game prior. So, the World Rugby is trying, more so in the past, to give the match official options. So again, think of this as a tool, not something we necessarily have to do, but it gets more towards that objective piece as we get to the outsides of the spectrum. So if we juxtapose that with this, maybe it makes more sense. That's why they haven't recommended, this, hey, yellow is at medium, yellow could be on the higher spectrum, or yellow could be on the lower spectrum, if that makes sense. Yeah, Alan, everything is going to be sent to you. The trigger words chart is already on the website under our resources, but I'm going to send this whole slide deck as a PDF, so it's going to be easily accessible. And the beauty of sending it as a PDF is you can look at it on your phone, when you're under break at work, et cetera, et cetera.
Great. Thanks, Chris. Terrific.
Pleasure. Okay, sweet. So what I like is we're all on yes, 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 yes. So this is the interesting one where we get to play with that mitigation. Now, on the day, this is a really hard, apologies. On the day, this is a really hard clip to pick up at all, to even see the nature of the contact, just because it's so, it's actually quite subtle when you're watching it in real time. So one more time. Great. So that's the shot we need. So here, this is the fact that we need to be able to gather. Now, we can't fault the AR because when play is coming towards you as an assistant referee, you're losing time and space. It's actually really, really hard to see. So the AR has almost no chance. Like I expect 0 assistant referees in the global game to be able to make a decision on this. This is a TMO referral every day of the week, not a casual one, but the TMO will actually come in because if you look at even the players, everyone kind of carries on with their business. And, you know, we end up in a knock on. And this is one of those things where in the community game, you know, sometimes we get away with stuff like that. I'm not saying the referee or the AR, the teams, we're lucky. And these aren't the ones we necessarily need to get, but we just need to be aware because sometimes this will happen in a more obvious way. And again, it doesn't matter how accurate our decision is, but did we arrive at a credible outcome? So if we are looking at this, yes, we can see, okay, we've got head contact, head on head. Great. Now, next thing we look at is, boom, I'll pop up those descriptive words. There we go. So we've obviously gone through this piece here. Has head contact occurred? Yes. Was there any foul play? Was the player at fault? Here we might need to flesh that out. Did we see a sudden or significant drop in height? Meaning, did they slip and fall? Maybe a bit of a dip, not enough. Time and space to react. Well, what does that look like? Did they have a clear line of sight? Yeah, it's an open field tackle. Is it a passive action? Passive meaning that was the player standing still? No, they still went into the tackle. They were high. So again, we can just use 2 words. Did they have clearly line of sight? Could they have gone lower in the community game? If you feel the answer is yeah, they could have, like that means they're at fault. Great. So then we move into the next step, which is degree of danger. So here's where we get into that meaty bit. So if we say that this is direct head contact, we're on high danger here. So direct head is a pretty hard thing. So is a shoulder, a head hitting a head, high danger. Does that mean it's automatically a red card? No, because if we go back to our process, and again, this is mainly where we live. These are the pieces when we're not sure. These are the pieces we study. This is the stuff we need to have comfort within our mental process. These are how we align our facts that we see. And again, we can only deal with what we see. On the day, I expect none of us to get this. None of us would even think of blowing the whistle just because of how everything happens and everyone moving on. So we go into this final step, mitigation. Mitigation with a TMO is very different than mitigation with ARs, is even more different than mitigation alone. It basically has to be something happened to lessen the sanction. So that could be a change in height. So yeah, they should have gone lower, but the person dropped at the last moment. Cool. A late change in dynamics, or they really tried, they just were a little late wrapping. Those are all things to mitigate. What I suggest we think about in the community game is this piece, sudden change in dynamic. That's what's in my little notebook when I referee with the TMO. And that is what I have in my notebook when I TMO for other referees. Change in dynamic, because that basically means, did something happen to change the picture? Was there a second player involved? Is there a step? Is there a slip? All of those things change in dynamic. If you see that and you've gone through the process, well, I've got direct head contact. Ooh, they're at fault. Oh, but there's a step inside. Even if it's a subtle step inside. If you feel that that step is clear and obvious and you can see it, then you can go one step. Final thing we'll say on head contact process.
Hey, Chris,
Mitigation. Sorry, go on.
real quick question.
No, carry on.
How much room do we give mitigation wise for when a ball carrier launches himself into a tackle? And the reason I ask in this case, obviously, if the defense is coming in direct, like on hard, that's a different picture. But here he's quite passive and the ball carrier launches himself in.
Sorry, let's speak to the picture here. So what you're describing there, Ben, if someone launches himself in. That's not really language of law. What's the only thing that's illegal for a ball carrier to do in terms of launching themselves in?
To lead with an elbow or forearm to the face.
Well,
basically.
and that becomes, now we have head contact against this person. Is that what we see here?
No.
No. So what's another thing in law that the ball carrier can't do?
Jump into a tackle.
100%. So they can't leave their feet unless, of course, they're diving to score, in which case they can do, but they cannot jump over a person, but they can dive to score. So here, what has the ball carrier done wrong here?
Technically nothing.
Correct. So we can't explore that. Now, what we can say, so if the ball carrier hasn't done anything wrong, technically, because again, we're all taught to go chest parallel to the ground in a contact, as the ball carrier does. And so it's not a fault of the ball carrier. However, the mitigation that's here, I'll tell you what, one word, can anyone, if you see mitigation, either type in what that word is. So is there a movement or a change in dynamic? See in one word, because if it's not easily describable, is it clear and obvious? If you don't see mitigation, just say no. So I'll give you 30 seconds, fire that in the chat. So let's assume we all have taken everyone on the same journey. If you disagree with the first three previous ones, no problem, have to have the conversation. For the purposes of mitigation, if you see mitigation, describe it in one word from this picture. Again, you can go back on your own platform. If you don't see mitigation, say no. We'll give a few moments for that as the answers are rolling in. Okay, so what I like is there's no's, there's the word dynamic, which is great. The only thing I'll say, step from Doug Thorpe, well done. There's a yes, which I don't know what that's in reference to, but that's okay. So effectively, the only thing, so again, just being the critic, because again, I spent 7 weeks with everyone microscoping my decisions. I'm just kidding. So just being critical from a positive point of view, in a formative way, you have to stick within the language of the framework. So if the tackle is dynamic, let's go back to just because again, semantics are one thing, but when there are words that are published, we have to be somewhat aware of them. Don't have to memorize the whole list. We have to be aware of what these triggers were, because this is on the, you can Google this. It's on the World Rugby website. It's on our website, but it's global public knowledge. So the key is it's a change in dynamic. Something that is dynamic. World Rugby says, okay, upright and dynamic is actually in the high level. They mean dynamic in terms of speed. Change in dynamics. Was there a change in speed or a change in direction or a change in height? So if you say it's dynamic and you're trying to say mitigation, just use the word change in dynamic. If that's okay, if I can be so bold as to correct you. And then the other piece is, and again, those of you who said no mitigation, I have no issue with that. But the people that said step, for me, that's a fact. As we see, there's a side step to the left and the person step back inside. Now, the only thing I would say, and again, I'm not going to pretend to know the answer because this is quite a complex one, but if you're saying that there's a step here in mitigation, mitigation must be clear and obvious and must have an impact. If you feel that the step changes nothing, like the player has a tucked arm, that's a different story. We don't think about mitigation. In this situation, it's a head-on-head. You are more than credible if you see that step as a change in the dynamic, therefore going from red to yellow. If you feel that it's not enough and the contact is horrific and it needs to be a red card, and you don't really consider that, if the AR said, oh, I saw a bit of a step, was the step going to make the difference? Did the step affect the dynamics of the tackle? No. And often even though we are process driven, the outcome can tell the story. If the player is bleeding on the ground from this contact, it's harder. You have to make sure that step is more clear. If everyone's walking away, you can probably sell that step a little bit more easy. Again, not letting the outcome drive the story, but that can inform the facts, especially when we have no TMO. Sometimes the facts we see are not necessarily the facts that happened from the wider view, if that makes sense, just because we're moving. And often if there's a camera in a good spot, it sees it. So once again, before we move on, this is not a criticism of on-field or off-field match officials looking after player welfare. This is it's just an interesting one. And again, I would have not picked this up on field, nor would I expect anyone else to. But again, it's a very, very good exercise to go through that process. So again, do have a look at this, practice a couple of these words, and the best way to do it, you can use the clips that we have on Coach Logic, or you can watch some of the footage from the weekend. And there's more than a few examples in test rugby, but do try to look at some of our local footage, because again, it looks different than the ultra high definition professional broadcast quality that is tier 1 test rugby. So we move on.
Sorry, I have a quick question before you
Sure.
move on. Sorry, Chris. A late change in dynamics due to another player in contact. It's the full sentence, right? So it's not just a late change in dynamics. Is necessary, but it's not sufficient. You need the late change in dynamics due to another player. So the step in is not another player in the contact, as I understand, correct?
Change in direction from ball carrier. That would be, see that for a
Okay,
sentence?
gotcha.
Yeah. So again, I'm not being critical. Looking at this so many times, you have to come up with, and I'm not saying my way is the right way, you have to come up with a way to summarize all the repetition. Otherwise, we're doomed to fail. So for me, this can be summarized. And again, this is just in my personal notebook as I prepare for games, others are for your TMO. For me, all of this mitigation means there was a change in dynamic. And that, in my mind, change in dynamic means change of height, second player involved, or change in direction, if that makes sense. But thanks for pointing that out. Sweet. So just in the interest of time, we won't go through this part, just something to think about. I just want to point your attention towards those key focus areas once again, but something I'll ask you to think about during the short off season between our first half and our second half, as we have that natural kind of end of year break. But which key focus area, meaning these pieces, was the biggest success for you, or the success of others that you've seen either through video or through just watching games at the park. So whether it be these are kind of the big phases, whether they be breakdown, space, set piece, foul play, and within those we have our roles or our situations. And I'll just show you really quick, if I may, where you can see those pieces. So if you go to the website, you'll see the three little lines. You click on the three little lines. I do not click on officiate. I know this layout isn't the best, but it's a lot better than it used to be. This is the join the game. So people wanting to become a match official, they can click here. You go down where it says resources, beyond all of their competitions information, coaches and officials. They put it deliberately, they meaning the marketing team, on one page, just so that the coaches can be referred to it as well, because I think we need to be on the same page. You scroll down, you scroll down, you scroll down. It's all on one page, so no more clicking around, which is quite nice. There's video links, all that kind of stuff. But if you look here, key focus areas, if you're a visual graphics flowchart kind of person, there's the breakdown piece. You can click on the space piece, and again, it just flows from big picture to definitions for players and coaches, words that we can use in the clubhouse, and then our process, what we do, and then what we decide. And then, yeah, so breakdown for me is kind of where the game, this is something I regularly review personally, but there are all the areas: breakdown, set piece, space, and foul play. And then there's key focus areas, video map. This is the interaction piece. If you're You need to see it in motion, video person. If you click on any of these, so if we click on, let's say, mall or line out setup, whichever, it will bring you straight to the KFA. Oh, there's an ad, apologies. But we click on skip and there you go. It will go through what it is. It will show you a positive picture and it will show you what it looks like done positively, negatively, and how to arrive at the decision, giving you some key process questions that you can use if you so choose. So let's move on from there. And again, the question I would have asked would have been, which one area do you want to target for the next, 6 months time? And again, I say one area because if you try to do them all, by all means, watch all the videos you want. But if you try to focus on all of these areas in your refereeing, you're going to become a textbook referee in the sense that you're going to be thinking of what you're meant to be doing as opposed to the facts unfolding around you. And ultimately, you'll get further away from the human piece, which we need to do. This is just for your reference afterwards. Okay. All right, so 2 more clips and then we're done from a breakdown point of view. But effectively, the only thing before we watch the clips I would like you to think about is, yeah, it's all well and good to know that, oh yeah, I need to deal with the tackler. Players need to know that they can't be in the way of the ball delivery. And I need to, I see them on the wrong side, and then decide whether or not they are in the way, which is this piece here, or they are in the way, in which case I have to penalize. So giving yourself the opportunity to let it breathe and make the decision that's clear and obvious, not one that you have to spend 5 minutes explaining to your friends in the clubhouse. So again, allowing people to come on that journey with us. They don't have to agree with what our decision is. They just have to understand how we got there. Cool. So let's go through it. Those 2 clips. Sorry, I had the screen shared. I just didn't have myself on the right screen. So let's get into it. Sweet. And again, if you're following along at home, it starts at, in this video, 123 from the set piece. And we are, in one word, going to decide on what, I don't care if it's a penalty or whatever, what is the thing or the person that we're most concerned about? So is it the tackler, the jackler, the clean out, or the ball carrier? What are we most concerned about in this picture that we're about to see from the scrum? And one more time. Sweet, throw that in the chat if you wouldn't mind. Awesome. Okay, I'm just gonna pick on one person who, as long as they're okay, if you're not okay, just stay silent. One person who said jackler, and then one person who said tackler. So let me just do a little search here. So Dwayne, if you're okay unmuting yourself, just give me I don't know if you're comfortable. And again, I'm not saying whether it's right, wrong, or whatever. Yeah, maybe 30 seconds on why you thought that.
Sure. I just, like I said, I looked at it really quickly, but it looked like the tackle was fairly clean with both players going to ground. The jackler comes in fairly low, and then the clean out players are coming in on top of them. And it seems like with the players on the ground, their head contact, like they're at little risk. It's all the jackler is pretty static. He's not moving. He's stationary. He's going in there. But those arriving red players are coming in with some speed and some intensity. And it just seems like that's the guy I'm looking at.
Sweet. And then, so you're looking at the jackler. Now, what do we need to see from the jackler? So like how does he be a legal jackler? What's the thing we need to see?
He is, I'd have to look again. He does look low, like he's moving off his feet, like he's not able to stand and hold his weight if he lifts the ball. So that inability to lift the ball, I'm not saying the jackler's not in a legal position or is in a legal position, but when we're looking at worry on who we're looking at, I was looking at that jackler.
I think you hit the nail on the head, Dwayne, right when you said lift the ball. Because that's the litmus test, really. Like off feet is such a gray thing, but I mean, I haven't seen yet in a game of rugby a jackler who is off their feet who can lift the ball. But yeah, no, exactly like you say. Like, you know, we can debate odds or knee on the ground, whatever. But that's the thing we're asking, and I love that. Like for you, I love you went through. You were like, you know what, the tackler's not a problem for me, and I don't mind that, especially because, like, look where the scrum is. It's on the 22. And the tackler does a great job of chopping the ball carrier down on first phase behind the gain line. And yeah, they fall on the wrong side, but this jackler's here so quickly. And yeah, like you say, this arriving support is pretty, well, they have to be high speed because they're pretty late. So no, that's awesome. And so again, it's not about whether or not we agree on which player that the issue is. It's, are we asking the right questions? And Dwayne, I think you hit the nail on the head. You're like, this tackler, for me, not a factor based on where the tackle's happening. Is this guy in a position to lift? And if he is, then we have to decide, well, is this going to be a holding on or is this going to be a sealing off? And either way, we would, if that's your line of thinking, we reward the jackler. Sweet. Thanks, Dwayne. And then I'll just ask another person, if you can, tackler. So let's go tackler. Doug Thorpe. And again, I'm not trying to leave any questions. Feel free to speak as you will. Why did you arrive at tackler as the thing or the person we need to be concerned about?
Yeah, so for me, looking at that picture, tackler just never gets out of the way, and then the resulting breakdown's a bit of a mess. So tackler's still in the picture, just penalize him and get him out of there.
Sweet. How very sevens of you. Not kidding. And that's a safe decision, especially when we, when we use that fact. If you decide that this person's a factor, then great. That's an easy penalty, especially because the ball is not available, and there's multiple people having to, it's a pretty messy situation, like you say. The other piece, going back to Dwayne's, is, and this is quite an advanced piece, is simultaneous arrival. If this guy is arriving at the same time the tackler hits the ground, then we have to look at the bigger picture. Who should win, all that kind of stuff. And we'll get into tactical just at the end of the call. But again, not concerned with what people are deciding on what the factor is. Just like the head contact process, let's just make sure that we're arriving at the decision in the same way as much as possible. And that's kind of the path to consistency. It's more of a coach-driven term, because what is consistency? But the tackler, again, our definition that we talk about with others outside of officiating is not in the way. This is kind of the rugby definition. And this is our process. Are they in the way or are they not in the way? And the kind of indicator is the wrong side. Tackler, are they able to lift the ball? If they're lifting the ball, then we have to make that decision. Is it lifted? Well, then we can either play on, or is it not lifted? Well, is it because that there was holding on, or because they were cleaned out before we were able to make that decision, in which case we can go penalty or play on. So just making sure we're asking the right questions. And we'll go back to this clip just before we get to tactical. But let's go through our final clip of the evening, if that's okay. Oh, no, we're not at tactical yet. So our final clip is just after this one, and it is at 1:44, even before that. There we go. Yeah, about 1:43, 1:44 on your YouTube scroll bars. And it's a very good global law trials piece right there. So I'll play it once and I'll play it again. So that's our decision right there. So again, going back to our breakdown roles, tackler, arriving player, entry, jackal, or the clean out. What is our decision-making factor? What are we most concerned about in one word? Fire away. So again, tackler, entry, jackler, or clean out. If you said latcher, be ready to be challenged back if that's okay. Smorts, you just joined the call. I'll show you a clip really quickly. It's been sent out to everyone, but effectively, we're just finding a word. So from a strategic point of view, when we watch this clip that's about to come up in the next phase, oh, sorry, I'll give you more lead time. Are we concerned with tackler, entry, jackler, or the clean out? All right, sweet. I see a lot of latch, a lot of sealing, clean out, entry, which is all good. No problem. So if you wouldn't mind, who used that fancy word as latcher, let's get Ben Lambrick. What is latch and latcher?
Latch is a supporting player of the ball carrier, having direct contact with ball carrier and going to ground on the tackle and not maintaining his feet.
Cool. So you're saying now you can see that in this picture, a latcher.
Yep.
So this guy here.
Yep, makes connection with the ball carrier.
Yep. Right there.
Yep. And then he's going to proceed to go directly off his feet.
Sweet. So that's a global law trial piece that has been adopted in the law. So that video that we sent out to simplify the global law trials in 2021, that's on the website, introduces this like latch is something that some of us have used in our jargon, but now it's in law. So Ben, just to go back, what's the definition of a latcher? Not from an illegal point of view, but what's a latch?
Connecting to a player going to ground and not maintaining feet. So
okay, let's peel it back one more. If
okay.
I'm a ball carrier,
Yep.
let's say I'm number 3 and he's got the ball, and I make contact with this player here, and then this guy gets up off the ground and then latches onto me. Is this person a latcher?
If
you don't know the answer, that's okay.
By technical definition, yes. So
that's where I challenge back and say, no, we have to be mindful of the latcher. Some people use the word pre-latch, which I love as a term. A latcher is someone who's bound to the ball carrier. Now it's been clarified, bound by law in mauls and scrums is shoulder. But in this case, if they are grabbing the ball carrier with a hand or they're bound with a shoulder
Grasping.
before contact with the defender. So
Okay, so it's before
after,
contact.
now the other, what's the other piece in latch law? There cannot, so this is legal right now because there's only one player. If we watch, see how this player doesn't latch on? There's only one player, number 8, as he goes to ground, latch to the ball carrier. So that's a latch and that's legal. However, who is number 8 treated like in law as if he goes to ground?
Clean out.
Yeah, so clean out, otherwise known as he's an arriving player. Arriving players, they must enter through the gate. Those of you who said entry, no problem, but when we refer to entry, it's more of a, they've come from the side and they haven't squared up. The clean out piece is, are they looking to remove a body? So it's not, are they off their feet? That's, again, subjective. Did they move somebody and then off their feet, or are they just falling on the ball or the ball carrier? In which case, we go back here. Now that we have that, if you identify a latcher, it becomes a more easy sealing off picture to sell, because everyone now knows since 2021, if there is a pre-latch like we see here, so see how they're about to go 2 and they only go 1. Number 9 makes a wise choice not to latch, which is great because why are 9s latching? Number 8 is pre-latched. He falls to ground and goes. Perfect. And then we added a seal off penalty. Now, there's actually one comment from a coach that came in. I don't really think it's clear and obvious, but question comes in: can you tackle the latcher? The answer is actually no. You can't tackle the latcher, but it's quite an interesting picture if you want to go down the rabbit hole. But I don't encourage that. Just making sure that our definitions are clear. This process applies to latchers as well. So, and I would even stress that because latch is specifically written in law as latchers have to stay up, they can't go to ground with the ball carrier. Your clean out definition, so are they moving players or are their feet on the ground, becomes more of a thing, more highlighted. So latchers, they get a little bit more scrutiny just because it's an area that's highlighted in law after surviving the global law trials for pre-latch. So again, if that's new to you, have a look back at the global law trials video on the website and on the YouTube channel, and then go back through like, okay, cool. Can I pick out a pre-latch versus someone who bounds onto the ball carrier after contact? And by the way, this does not apply for line out to maul. There can be 12 players pre-bound to someone who catches the ball, as long as the line out hasn't ended. As soon as the player moves off the line of touch, the lineout's ended. They can't then bind onto the ball carrier before contact. But the key is a latch equals bound before contact. Now, if there are more than 1, if there are a pot of 3, ball carrier plus 2, that's a penalty. That's a flying wedge. That's in foul play. I've had to chop a try off for it. It's not popular, but hey, it's in law. So where we go. So we will end on this tactical approach. So again, your technical pieces are great, but again, our human component that we talked about at the beginning, which is giving yourself the time and space. And again, that starts and remembering the messages you deliver are mainly what people understand rather than what we give. And we had some really good input from the group. That's very important, as well as our tactical approach. Our technical pieces are things we keep working at. Our tactical approach is what's going to get us to the right, or I guess the understandable outcome in those big moments. So again, I'll send this out to everyone, but in summary, it's understanding who's under pressure and what are they going to do. They're either going to do something unfair, dangerous, or legal. And the more we understand this piece before the action that we need to decide on happens, the more chance we have to gather the facts we need to come to an understandable decision. It's not about being right. It's about making a decision that everyone can follow, because rugby is going to be in a better place if we make decisions that everyone goes, you know what, I might not agree, but I get how you got there. Knowing your head contact process is a part of it, because again, we need to make sure we look after players, and that's tactical as well as technical. We just need to know how that works and a strategic way to address it. So you can use that when it comes to mitigation, change the dynamic. You can use that unavoidable when it comes to, is the player at fault? It's your choice. But again, being familiar with that in a way that makes sense to you. And again, once you are familiar, using facts, not feelings. So not things that you thought you saw, but things you saw, or things that your team saw. And again, going back to our basics, we need to be able to move. And this is where physical stuff comes into it, so that we can see the big picture. So not too close, not too far, not too dynamic from our point of view. We need to observe and gather the relevant facts, and then we decide how to add the facts up. And we breathe so that we can make sure the outcomes and facts add up and people can understand what we're on about. So thanks everyone. I really, really appreciate it. There's an additional clip that we won't go through because apologies, we're 14 minutes over. And again, this piece on tactical just helps us avoid these referee-driven high-impact decisions as much as possible. I've highlighted a couple of technical areas that might help if you're having a bunch of, wow, I don't know why, I keep getting these massive moments wrong in your personal review, if that's happening, or wow, I don't know how I got that right, and you feel like you're in that I'm not sure zone. To avoid these referee-driven high-impact decisions, which are decisions that affect the score or the number of players on the field that are unfortunately incorrect. These skills especially they're things that we never think about, but they are such good tools in the pocket. And some of us do it, some of you do it really, really well without thinking about it. But if you're conscious of it and you have good habits, you again, it increases our chance to get those moments, not necessarily right, but at least to an understandable outcome. So again, takeaways, we need to be humans. We need to prepare for what it feels like during and after a big moment, as well as before the game. We need to regularly check in with our peers and watch the footage. Take advantage of the Coach Logic platform. If you look at the email I sent out, and it might be in your junk email, but it's got a little link for those of you who are not on the Coach Logic platform. I've created a link so that it's active till December 1st. So if you go here, you can, if you haven't already set up your Coach Logic account, you click here and it will take you to the create your own account for our Coach Logic hub. That way you can access our team room, which gives you the feed. And there's a couple of how-to videos on there that you can make clips and all that. Even if you don't want to make clips, you can just scan through this. It's kind of like a Facebook thing. It's only within our BC kind of referee group, plus a few friends from out of province. But effectively, if you want people to see what you're doing or make comments, you can do that too. You can also say at so-and-so. For example, Dave can talk to me, I can talk to Dave, etc., etc. It's a really cool tool. And if you click on videos, you can access. And Brad has done a really good job helping upload all of the games, not just the Premier games. So all the games that have video are pretty much on here. So Tim, you've got a game on there. Brett's got a game on there. Mark Abercrombie, you got a game on there. Andy Foster, Nat Height, Brad, Cole's on here, Derek's on here. And Brad's done a good job putting the name and then the game title. So you can watch the games, you can watch your own game. And then any game that's Premier, we've got the services of the analysts this year again, which is awesome. So if you go to, for example, let's go Derek Horton, Pride versus Lomas. If you look at the ones with the green emblems, they have been coded. So if you click on the matrix, you've got all of these pieces here. So you can look at their free kicks, their penalty kicks, their restart receptions, a lot of these pieces for coach as well. Their scrums, scrum launch is like the first few phases. There you can look at their tries. So if you just want to see your penalty kicks, you can see the number of them that are given away by just clicking here. Here's a penalty kick conceded. There's all the penalties conceded by the Pacific Pride. So you can see there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 of them. And you can see the penalty kicks conceded by the Lomas. This is actually a pretty cracking game. Actually, I think he was like less than a try in it, which is good for the league. That Lomas, who previously finished like 10th or 11th, are taking on the Pride, which is awesome. Good for everyone. And yeah, you can, if you wanted to see the penalty, click on one of the tags, and it will take you directly to just the penalty. So if you're strapped for time, you want to see, hey, what are people penalizing? We can look at this one. We can be like, there's a scrum, ball's put in, ball's out, and it's usually the beginning of the penalty. So we'll see Derek's going to blow his whistle eventually. And they try to give as much lead up time. Oh, we got a penalty. So then you can go back and you can see what it's for. Duck, Jackler over the ball. Clean out from the side. Derek gives a side entry. Perfect. So again, you can look at that through your own games, through other people's games. It's all there. We have unlimited, BCRU pays for unlimited users. So by all means, sign up if you haven't already got this. So this email I sent out, let me go back here. I sent this email out, and again, it might be gone to your junk mail just because these blind carbon copies in compliance with the Privacy Act sometimes find themselves in junk mail. But it was sent on the 11th of November at, the 9th of November at 8 o'clock. And again, it's got a couple of pieces, but if you go to the Taking Advantage of Coach Logic video hub, you can go down here and activate your own account. Or if you don't remember your password, you can click here and reactivate your password. There's also a how-to video on how to create clips. If you, for example, saw something in a game, you see the game up there, you can create a clip and you can share it. It's all pretty self-explanatory. It just takes time to play with it, which is awesome. So, and sorry, Brad, that's a really good point. If you find your game and it's not online, send a message to me or to Brad. It's pretty easy. If you have a YouTube link, whatever, we can take that, download it, and upload it to the hub. Sweet. Again, sorry, I just think that might be useful for a lot of people. Thanks, everyone. Again, I really appreciate everyone taking the time and the engagement level. And again, please feel free, dive through this content, send a message, get in touch with your peers. And again, we really look forward to seeing you on the field, if not in the next couple of weeks for the business end of the age grade season, then in the restart of the senior club season, which will be in mid to late January. And do stay tuned for a little teaser. We are looking at putting together an on-field session where people can get together from across the province. There's just a couple I's to dot and T's to cross. In mid-January. There's just a couple dominoes that need to fall before we can accomplish that. Thanks, everyone.